Professor Yong Zhao is a Foundation Distinguished Professor in the School of Education at the University of Canberra. He was also telling us that besides that, he's a professorial fellow at the Mitchell Institute for Health and Education Policy, Victoria University in Australia. In addition, he retains 2 other positions overseas as well. I think we've stayed because we heard the tremendous contribution and, of course, the other people around the panel made this morning. And now Yong has his opportunity to take us with him in talking about what works can hurt, the side effects in education. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I just got back from your friends. Maybe they're not. You just put them up in the mountains. Maybe they're not. They were really nice people. They were the schools feeding students to you, right? And I told them you're having a conference at Wine Center. They immediately got jealous. So that's, and they were going to come down with me. And I said no, because that's before I knew you tweeted you have sit-down lunch. Jane, I don't know if it's a good idea. You're inviting a lot more people coming to SASPA now, right? It was really good lunch. I've never been to any conference that had actually a nice meal for lunch like that. The only thing missing was there's no wine served at the Wine Center, right? I would rectify that in the next year, right? I mean, why do you have a meeting at the Wine Center without wine, right? It's not. Anyway, so thank you. It was really fun this morning. I wish I could have stayed longer. It was. I don't know what my Chinese brother who substituted me said, but everything was good. I gather So we talk about. Joe posed a really fabulous question because in education we seldom consider the side effects. We actually don't even believe it has side effects. So, like now you go to a pharmacy, you buy something. If you buy anything, there is a warning label, right? That's a warning label. For example, you buy something to cure your headache. You guys have a different brand. What's your brand here? Tylenol. Okay, I thought it was an American brand. No? Okay, that's fine. That's Tylenol. Okay, thank you. So if you read the Tylenol label, it's really funny. Tylenol says it can reduce fever, maybe it can stop a runny nose, but it can cause a bleeding stomach. Do you read that? But in education, have you ever received a warning label, like when NAPLAN was released, to say, this can do this, but that, when the curriculum was released, or when, like, a reading program, people come to sell your reading program, say, well, this reading program might improve your reading scores on NAPLAN, but may make your children hate reading forever. You don't receive those things, right? No. Why is that? I think the big thing is that in education, we really generally believe if it's something called education, it must be something good. Do you notice that? That's what we generally believe. But really, if you think about, even under a huge umbrella of education, we have Frederick the Great says, the educated people are the easiest to govern. That means they become stupid. And Thomas Jefferson says education is the only way to defend a democracy. That apparently they're talking about different kind of education. It's not the same education. Think about, so is education more indoctrination or is it about liberation? So that's something we can think about. So education, I always claim education can actually do harm. So today I want to really invite us to think about the side effects. When I call the side effects, it's not called unintended or unanticipated, all those kinds. It is everything has both sides. So in the Chinese saying, we call this thing called, all medicine is poison. So that's the kind of things. So we need to think about now the main effect and side effects. There are different types of those things. Sometimes like the main effect itself is bad. In English, you call this thing, the remedy is as probably deadly as the disease. So the first thing, for example, you could apply an education approach, like some medicine, Basically, it so successfully cured the disease that it killed the person. The most effective medicine cures disease actually when the person is dead, the disease is gone. That's actually something that happens. So let's imagine, by the way, this is, you can tweet to me, tell people I did not drink any wine. Okay, it's no wine served to me, at least. Okay. Now, let's think about education. We've been thinking a lot about education compared to Asia. Let's look at international systems. We always, this morning, are talking about how we admire the PISA, the teams coming out of Asian countries, like Hong Kong, Singapore, China, sometimes even Finland. Okay. By the way, I really believe if China participated in the first round of PISA, there would not be Finland. Finland would have no business in this whole thing. I mean, the first round, actually, a lot of Asian countries did not participate. If they did, I'm sorry, Finland will remain as a silent island where people are still wrestling with mooses, and that's you can tell Pazzi I said that. That's still possible. But anyway, so you heard this idea that the Asian countries are doing great, okay? So, but why are they doing so great, and what would the side effects be? So think about education. It's really one model is education like gardening? That we build a garden, we only allow certain species to grow. That's basically your Australian curriculum. When you prescribe a curriculum, you'll say, these are valuable talents, skills, and knowledge that we want to grow. So if you're building a tulip garden, you want to get rid of roses. Remember this? So that's the first thing we decide. But then how effective are you is determining how good a gardener you are. A good gardener of keeping the tulip garden is very good at detect any potential of roses coming up. You see, they can yank it out. That's called early intervention. Okay, that's called it's early intervention. You say, well, this is thing come. A good one also is good not only making sure the qualities grow, tulips grow, they also make sure other things don't grow. So they fertilize this. So that means you kind of, you have, say, some poor tulip could become roses. What do? We want extended, remediation for reading, because reading is kind of tulip, what we want to grow, right? The other things we can get rid of. So every education system, in essence, is trying to be a garden of something. Okay, everybody's trying to be a garden. So the Asians, and everybody follows the same model. That's why I call PISA, teams, you're all measuring the same thing. How successful we are in turning our children, the diversity of children, into homogeneous set of individuals. That's basically what we're talking about. It's that everybody's like the same idea. How do we turn everything into tulips, okay? And hoping the tulip will grow at the same time and will meet the same standards. So that's what we have. So that model is this. That model is the preparation model. That is, we think, as I said before, our children in the future will need these skills and knowledge to succeed in life. It's called, you have this idea about readiness. So we want our children to go to Melbourne. You give them backpack. You say, to survive in Melbourne, you need this following things. So in first grade, we give you this one piece in your backpack. By the time you finish year 12, you got enough things to backpack, and you go to Melbourne to survive. That's our traditional idea. We prepare them because we look at our future workers like this. Those are our future workers. They need the same skills and knowledge, but in our hand are people like this. In this model, children are the most annoying thing in our education system. I mean, really, because they're just different. If they were the same as we want them to become, we would have no problem. Do you guys notice that? So if you want to really cure the problem of education, just get rid of kids. I mean, really, you can be very successful, right? So the problem is this. So this is our all education today. is trying to reduce them, turn them into this, into beautiful gardens, into like this. So who is more successful is measured by teams, but not plants. So you're measuring the growth of tulips, nothing else, right? So we call how well you can homogenize. So in essence, the Asian systems have done a beautiful job making everybody the same. Making everybody the same. It's Finland too, actually, making things very homogeneous, make everybody the same. So that's the idea. And you look at any of the test scores like this. But at what cost? That's actually an interesting question to ask. At what cost? When you turn everybody into the same, what you don't have is other potential talents. That's the. But that may not be a problem. Do you guys know if truly the society required everyone to do the same thing, do the same job, actually that's not a problem. If everybody loved tulips, that's okay. The problem is that society shifts. We know that the Stone Age did not end because they ran out of stones. Problem, right? That's a problem. So economy change. Economies change, and then the problem is that during the Stone Age, before they ran out of stones, they were replaced by something else. So if you were running a school at the Stone Age, what would your curriculum be? That's the Stone Age village curriculum. It would be how do you cut stone tools, right? I mean, don't underestimate the power of tool cutting, stones. Okay, so like this. This is from Queensland, by the way. And so this is, so if I were writing a new curriculum for this, you want to write down things like how do you identify the stone, how do you read the stone, how do you talk to stones, kind of communication, relational stuff, with the stone. You got to do, it's a quite, progressive book, right? All this. But then, so if you run this school, you get a bunch of kids come in and say, I'm not really into stones. I'm into copper. I'm into bronze stuff, But you tell them, no, our requirement is to do stones, okay? And so you'll be kind of failed. You are not plan, you're not satisfactory, okay? So you guys are going to be into special education, okay? And then what happens then is that now suddenly, people decided, God, the stone stuff is not as good as the copper stuff, So the stone people have all lost their jobs, and then the bronze guys on the side saved the economy. Remember that's always happens, right? So look at now today, many people think about, we know the future. The curriculum people, we talk to business people, say, in the future, now if you look at, we have a labor shortage. Like right now in Adelaide, you have a labor shortage. Your worst labor shortage in what area? Do you guys know? Welders. Because you're building some submarines, those things. And your submarine, by the way, is built. It's not economical to have automation because you only are building 8. I'm sorry about that. It's and 8 is not worth automating. So you're still using human beings to weld those things, and you're flying them from Western Australia. And right now, so if you said, okay, we have this job shortage, therefore all our students shall get into this welding. That's great. That's why you guys are kind of mistakenly saying, we got all do STEM. Remember, that's one of the kind of stupid ideas you can have. Talk about this thing. We got all do STEM, we got all do, because they look at this, this all do coding. Remember those kind of stuff? By the time your students finish got into a job market, the coding jobs have sent to India already. What are you predicting? Do you see what I mean? That's why this morning I said, you don't prepare kids to go to Sydney or Melbourne. You prepare them to create Sydney or Melbourne to change the whole idea. But anyway, so the idea, the Asian countries are good at homogenizing if the society never changes. Homogeneous is a marvelous idea. That is, we know this will be here, this will. However, as you know, societies change. So when you have one type of talent, what happens when it changes? You're unable to move. This has happened in the U.S., Michigan, Ohio. Those states were, the Trump supporters. They were not able to change. They were all making cars. Because I lived in Michigan for 15 years, for example. No politician could be elected if they did not support cars. So, but they're supporting corporate cars, I can say the same way, they lost all the cars. Auto industry, all those Pennsylvania, the whole Wisconsin, the whole region, they couldn't change, they couldn't shift. The same thing what happened like in China. Let's took the idea about diversity of talents is as important as diversity as biodiversity. So let me give you the historical perspective on this. 1842, I think, it's Britain, or the British Empire, angered two big groups. They messed up with the Irish, and they messed up with the Chinese. So about 1842. I know you guys, a lot of you are, Adelaide is the only place you were not prisoners, you were not convicts, right? Is that true? Okay, I'm glad. Actually, I always thought the British made a mistake. They should have kept the convicts back home and come here. Right? This is a much better place to be than that little place. Anyway, I think they are regretting that now. But now. What happened there is that in Ireland they had the potato famine. Remember the potato famine? In China they had the Opium War. Both caused by the Brit and the English. We can blame the English for everything, okay. But you analyze this then, actually both were caused by the lack of diversity. Because in Ireland, you have one type of potato. When the disease comes in, no matter what, it's going to wipe you out. In China, they had one type of people. Because of the Keji or the imperial exam system, they only selected people based on how well they read the Confucian classics, how well they can write beautiful poem. Those have nothing to do with science, technology, engineering. Even though in China, I read about 400 years ago, they had the potential to have an industrial revolution. They didn't, because they had only one type of talents. The emperors, they never liked anybody who played with engineering or science. So that's how China lost in that regard. And this is why, honestly, now in East Asian countries today, they don't accept this. But this is their problem. China is going to stop growing for a long time. You probably noticed that China, Japan, Korea, Singapore, these all are kind of stuck in the area. Singapore relies on imported talents from other places. So when the economy shifts, for example, if you look at China, over the past 30 years, everybody's impressed with how China grew, all this time. What happened to China is, in essence, in 1970s and 1978, 1980s, there happened to be picking on jobs that was sent over by Taiwan, Hong Kong, the four Asian tigers, that we call them, the tigers, with making shoes, manufacturing shoes, textile, all those things. And then, luckily, after that, they were able to pick on jobs in manufacturing cheap electronics, in like television, electric fans, all those from Korea and Japan. And now, of course, China is going to try to advance things. So once they enter the competition, it's going to be troublesome because everybody's working in the same domain. That was okay. And Korea is, if you have noticed, South Korea is having trouble now. Samsung, everyone knows Samsung? Samsung's biggest problem now is to say, if Apple dies, who are we going to copy from? It's not joking. If you guys have you thought through the whole process, how do you reinvent? Actually, right now, if you think about phones, this is a really interesting story. If you think about the phones, I was in China. All this, China makes really good cell phones now. You can buy them. It's cheap. It's nice. All those kind of stuff. And they're a big manufacturer called Huawei. Their really big problem is they said, okay, really, what are we going to do next? I said, well, the next big inventor is the one who makes this thing disappear. That somebody is thinking outside the box. And that's the guys who are playing with copper, not with the stone tools. It's someone else. So that actually why I call diversity of talents is very important. But we didn't realize we want to make sure everybody's the same. So I always said Australia and the Western society's education system has always been able to somehow, some way, preserve that diversity. And how did we do that? It's quite interesting. Even though we follow the same model, we know every education follows the same paradigm of turning kids into the same thing, into the same kind of talent, we all follow the same model. So how did you preserve this, especially until recently? I think it's because, number one, you had a really messy system. You're messed up. So you did not have a centralized system. Do you notice the whole thing? You were actually by yourself in South Australia, in all those kind of things. America is even worse. It's in many ways we call that. So if you treat this, what I call reduction of diversity, as what I call sausage maker, we turn all this diverse set of meat into the same kind of sausages, So Australia is a broken sausage maker. And that made some bacon. Right? The bacon is the ones kind of got out of the system. That's number one. You used to have a decentralized system, a lot of local autonomy. So therefore, you were not so good at implementing the homogenization process. You have more diversity, you have more creativity, not because you teach creativity better, you are just not successful in killing them as the Asian system. You don't teach any better, you don't kill it as successfully. That's the idea. So that's how did we do it? The broken system. I'm going to show you the U.S. model. This is very important thing. How did you preserve diversity? By the way, this is the side effects. By preserving diversity, you cannot achieve the same test scores. Because test scores in two subjects measures homogeneity. It always measures something that moves. That's why when we admire called Finnish equity. If equity measuring test scores, it's facing a lack of diversity in test scores. Okay, this is, I can get you very confused, but but look at this. How did America preserve diversity? And give an example first. Let's think about it this way. China always admires Steve Jobs. Okay, so it said, how come we don't have Steve Jobs? I believe, genetically speaking, those extremely great people in inventive, are randomly distributed. No race, no group says we got more. We just happen to have more people born in our place. No. So China has about 1.4 billion people, US about 300 million. So that's about 4 times. So there should be 4 Steve Jobs born in China. There might be kind of Steve Lee, Steve Zhang, Steve Zhao, something like that. But what happened to those 4 Steve Jobs in China? Do you notice the whole thing? What happened is that because we have a system was so good, one Steve Jobs was put in jail because it was too creative, and it just doesn't like the government. And one other Steve Jobs got, kicked out of the system because did not meet the standards, Another Jobs, we said, I'm going to play the game, get good test scores, all those things. Maybe another one, I don't know, what just dropped out by himself, said, I can't handle this. That's so how did the US and Australia maintain this? Because number one is public provision. A public education is key because what does public education do? You never pre-select. You allow those guys who love play stone tools in. You allow those play copper in. You allow all those people in. You don't pre-select. I think that's a very valuable. Your minister said something that's important. Said, to preserve diversity, you do not pre-select. You do not predetermine who gets to play in the system. Many other countries have a country club system. That is, you only allow those people who are like you into the system. That's what, like in many countries, like in East Asian countries, we have so-called meritocracy. Only those who have good test scores can go up. But here, you allow everybody to play. So public provision, public funding is very important to think about. But also more importantly here, the last two. That local control and open and forgiving are massively important. Until recently, again, Australia, you had a more local control. Now I think your national control come later because that's America trying to do the same. America has the Common Core, George Bush, all those kind of things. We're losing those things. But also local control, it also means schools have a lot more autonomy. You can decide to add more or less content, and your teacher can have more autonomy in doing those kind of things. But this is also the same result is that you are not going to be as good as Asian countries in testing. And many of you as school leaders, you really cared about your children. And you really think every individual human being are human being first before they're a student. You believe they're human beings before they're just someone to give you a good reputation test taken. But Asian countries don't believe that. Asian parents, teachers actually think their kids, their good test scores indicate the family status, indicate the school status. But some of you at least have not bought into that yet. So you allow children to progress like a human being. Of course, naturally, your test score is not going to be high. So now the question you want to ask yourself, do you want a diversity of talents? Do you want more homogeneous talents? And diversity cannot come from a system that emphasizes homogeneity. Remember, those things are not incompatible, not compatible together. So unfortunately, Australia, New Zealand, actually all the Western countries have decided to say, hey, we like test scores. We love them. And then therefore we want to more homogenize our children. Did you notice all your system is trying to homogenize? Did you guys notice that? We want to turn everybody into sausages. We love them. That's the whole idea. And this is why, this is like competition. I call this a suicidal pursuit of educational excellence. Because we review education excellence in a different way. And a good example is this, guys. And if you read history, Easter Island, I believe it's not very far from here. Just a few days of swim, might get there. I was in Fiji. I tried to get there. I didn't go that far. But anyway, people were always wondering what happened. Who did this stuff? Okay. And they said, okay, on Easter Island, they said aliens did it. But really, most recent research says human beings did it. Easter Island once had a great, prosperous civilization. Very good. Fashion, boat building, animal husbandry, they are really good. But one time, so suddenly, they got into this contest called Naplan. They began to believe they have about 13 tribes on this island. So they began to believe whoever can erect the most magnificent stone head has more power and will please God a lot more. Like you believe, whoever has the best Naplan scores has the better education quality, and God will favor you more, and your children will be more successful in the future. It's the same equivalent, okay? So I'm glad you're not building stone heads yet, but you might, but don't give this to Parliament. They might pick on this idea, So they got into this competition. They really believed that. So what they did is all the male went to the one end of the island to really carve the stone heads, and then they have to transport them back. So they neglected real work, farming, fashion. They neglect all this work, and they have also to erect these things and transport them. They need to cut down those giant oil pine trees to move them, roll them. So in the end, of course, deforestation, negligence of real productive work, and caused famine, desertification. That's the end of the civilization. So that's when the Westerners arrived at the island. They said, how can about 2,200 people maintain a civilization like this? So think about yourself. If we move on to this direction, to say we only have one type of people, we're so good, and then what's going to happen next? That's the basic question to say that this is. So historically speaking, I would like to say the side effects of a centralized test score that measures homogeneity has the strong side effects of getting rid of people who do not fall into the process. And this is the same with, I would like to say, I got to give you this story. I was not going to do it, but I'm going to tell you the story. The story of Rudolph. It's great stuff. That's why I'm running a Rudolph group with people. Rudolph the red-nosed wren has a red nose. You guys know the story, okay? And the national standard in reindeer country says all noses shall be black. So Rudolph naturally had a problem, right? Because we decided society wants black at that time. And so nobody liked him. was put into special education, remediation, all those kind of work, and luckily it didn't work, right? So on a foggy Christmas Eve, Santa Claus was looking for a GPS to guide him, and luckily they found Rudolph. So this is, again, the idea about the one cast on the outside might be the one who will change the future. In today's society, we really have to think about that, is that no one has the right bet to say only this thing. So when people do things like the Australian curriculum, do those things, they're trying to prescribe something for millions of children. I'd be very nervous sitting in that position. But doesn't seem like a lot of those people doesn't seem to feel like they are worried. Do you guys know about the future? So I'm definitely worried when you get all these people kept arguing. They said, math is absolutely important. Without math, you don't even qualify to be a person. That's what people actually was in Victoria yesterday, the day before, talking with the Victoria Department of Education. One person actually said that. I said, what if a person says, I'm not interested in Algebra 2? He said, well, isn't that the same like saying I'm not interested in obeying the law? That's like a government bureaucrat. I said, well, laws typically regulate the things that you don't do harm to other people. How am I not interested in Algebra 2 is harming other people? If anything, I'm helping other people. So I'm so stupid you can do it for me. When you go through this process, math is a really interesting story. I'm here basically, as you know, when you get older, you're trying to defend why you didn't do certain things. So that's what I'm doing. I didn't do math. I ran away from math. And I've been running away from what I'm not good at for all life, So my math was really bad, so that's why I chose to study English. Just to let you know how bad my math was. 1982, I took the college entrance exam in China. I got 3 out of 120. If you know math, that's pretty bad. That's pretty bad in math, okay? And so with that math, I majored in English because in China at that time, if you want to major in a foreign language college, they'll forgive your incompetency in math because they say you're dealing with other people that don't know math anyway. That's the idea. So it's and so I guess that's how it works. Okay, but then, however, I actually become really good at statistics. So the math test has nothing to do with this. So when anyone will emphasize why math is necessary, but of course one person does not justify the case. Let me give you another person. 2 might be good. The guy who founded the company called Alibaba. You've heard of the company? One of the largest companies, online internet technology company. The founder of that company is called Jack Ma, or Ma Yun in Chinese. He took the test the same year as me, 1982. He got 1 out of 120. So that's pretty hard to get, right? If you do anything, you will get more than 3, but but somehow he just got 1. That's amazing. He didn't get into college. He tried next year, worked really hard on his math, got 19 the next year, and tried again the third year, got to 70-some. Okay, so he shows several things. First of all, it's not really that important to take a test at your age 18. And the test does not predict your ability to handle math. I can really handle math later on. But also, more importantly, it shows a lot of those so-called jobs, and it apparently has not interfered with Jack Ma's ability to count money. He has hundreds of billions of dollars, right? So when people create any of those things, I said, you must be able to do this. I want to be very cautious with those kind of statements. When people say, yes, they're important, but really people should be forgiven for some things, especially side effects idea. If you want to preserve those things, for example, let's take another example. How do you deal with this? Okay, I showed you this before. I'm sure you guys know dyslexic people in your life. Okay, dyslexia needs to be fixed. But we forget dyslexic individuals are like those people in the Stone Age village, Stone Age school, playing with bronze. They're really good with art. They're good with patterns, graphics. They're good with the, actually stars. So they could make very good astrophysicists, video game designers, artists, interior designers, any of those kind of things. So you want to make them to say, you got to read. Or you say, yeah, forget about it, and you go do your art, hire someone else read for you. What do you think of that? So, and maybe, time changes, right? Let's say 100 years ago, art, not really useful. Today, don't you think everything has become art? Did you guys notice everything has become art? Look at how many TV channels, how many, your dress. You don't have a barber shop anymore. You have hair designers. You guys have all kinds of things, right? Everything's art. Food has become art. You guys notice that? The more money you pay, the less food you get. Because it's an art experience, right? So how come artists are not become more important? Why don't we make art the foundation? The requirement of everybody else, right? So that's when you require everyone to become the same, be very careful. So that's number one lesson, side effects. Now, when you design something, you cannot ask it to be something else. That's why China says, okay, Asian countries, whenever they have test scores coming out, PISA, they always look at how come our children are not creative, are not diverse, are not innovative? How come they don't want to do this? They're worried about that. Then another thing is that we have the cognitive versus non-cognitive outcomes. When I'm talking about improve your reading scores, but may make you hate reading forever. Remember that idea. We've seen this all the time. In Asian countries, again, I'm going to throw you some of data to say, we like teams, we like all those kind of like PISA, because we love their test scores. But actually, it is true that a country's test scores is deeply and seriously associated with the children's attitude. So this is from 2004 TIMSS data. Countries that with high test scores in math, their students enjoy math less and have less confidence in their math abilities, which means that they can score very high, but I don't think they're very good. Now, this is 2004, and we have the 2011, 2016 had the same kind of data. Okay, so you don't even need worth repeating. Just look at the ideas. I was saying that the top Asian countries, I call them the chopsticks and mathematics. Okay, if you use chopsticks, you have pretty good math scores. I think Australia should adopt that. Make everybody use chopsticks. It's digital. It's right. It's binary. It's scientific thinking, right? Binary. But now you look at the confidence. So South Korea has the highest test scores, 100 points higher than Aussies, but only 3% of their students think they're good at math. Australians, of course, we are stupid, but we are good. We got 17% of our students, and 38% in year 4, and only 11%. You see the difference? Okay, so we have this really great belief of our ability. Now you want to ask yourself, do you want a confident kid? Do you want to have a high score kid? If you cannot have both. If you cannot have both, what would you like to have? Confident, right? Because if you're confident or arrogant, you feel like you can do it, right? You can always make up like I was rated so bad at the math test scores, I never thought I was bad actually at the math. I just said I decided not to do it. So that's actually, because you look at all the knowledge, the skills you capture, it actually so happens that you don't have to learn things so urgently. You can always make up. Human life is much longer, right? But by the way, this confidence transfers to PISA entrepreneur confidence. Today we talk about entrepreneurs. Countries with high PISA scores have lower entrepreneurship confidence. That means, yeah, they did all this tests, they did all right, but they don't think they can do anything. So your students become, not only that, they enjoy the subject less. Is that a good idea when you teach students? The more you teach them, the more they hate you? Have you noticed that idea? So in our schools, I've been always thinking about this is a real story because for me, I always focus on what I call lifelong educational outcomes versus instructional outcome. Okay, instructional outcome is the subject. Educational outcome is the human being. So the human quality might be more important than instructional outcome over there. I have two children, and they are, just to prove that I do, that's my daughter. She's not actually at Edinburgh and studying literature and philosophy, but actually when they were younger in the US, as an immigrant, we want to make sure they learn Chinese, right? They kept connected with China, all these roots. So we sent them to weekend school, Chinese school, and we discovered the more they go there, the more they hate Chinese language, and then they began to hate Chinese people who invented this stupid language now. So I said, when they developed a negative attitude toward this thing, I said, man, it's time to stop. I'd rather maintain a neutral attitude than trying to give this negative experience. Let's think about our school, not only confidence. What other things are we doing to our children? If our students come to our school, they feel like they're being rejected because they're not good at something. You kept telling them they're not good at something, they lose confidence, they lose self-esteem, they become disengaged, they find value in other places, joining gangs, doing drugs. Would you like that to happen? See, that's what, and I'm sure we're seeing that already, the side effects. So instructional outcome. Then we have another difference. This is called cognitive versus non-cognitive. A lot of times, cognitive outcomes do not necessarily go along with the non-cognitive outcomes. So but we only look at the cognitive outcomes. Then we have actually other outcomes, which we think about in terms of time, short-term versus long-term. In our schools, a lot of times we go after what's called successes. But some of the successes can be simply unproductive. There's a lot of experimentation showing this thing, especially when you look at teaching methods like direct instruction. I'm sure it was one of your Christopher Pines from here, right? Yeah, he's a big fan of direct instruction, right? Okay. Is he around here? Okay, good. Okay, so I'm going to say something about that. Direct instruction, that's why UK is borrowing teaching from China, transporting teachers. They think they're doing inquiry-based, but actually they're not. Direct instruction can get you test score up really high, really quick. Actually, because most test memorization. Do you notice that we don't need time to explain this stuff, to just memorize stuff. How Chinese students or Asian students achieve high scores, that's another pedagogically speaking, they simply try to exhaust all possibilities of how you can test them. And when the Chinese students, they do a lot of items. They try to make guesses. How many ways they're going to be able to test me on this knowledge point? And they kind of anticipate all those kind of things. However, those can we call unproductive. If you measure short term, it's successful, but in long run, it's not. I'll give you some examples. Let's go to lower grades, lower primary. There's two psychological studies. One is about 4-year-old children playing with toy. So one way to do toy is to, of course, as a teacher, if you're following that you want to efficiency, what do? You teach your child to say, okay, hey, look at this toy. This is how you play with it. Remember those things? This is how you play. Okay, step 1, step 2, step 3. Children watch that. Okay, I said, now you go play. Okay. Now another way to teach children is to say, hey, children, I just found this toy. I don't know what to do with it. Can we play together? Let's see what we can do. Inquiry-based, direct instruction. Now, if you try to measure how quickly did a child master the correct way to play with a toy, the first approach definitely is more successful, right? To say, okay, because direct saves time. However you want to measure children's interest, curiosity, creativity, the second way is much more successful. The first one actually kills creativity and curiosity. Children, once they know an answer to something, they're not interested in it anymore. So by the way, my suggestion, if you don't want your children to learn anything, try to teach them. Using direct instruction. Right? If you got kids addicted to video games, teach them. Tell your children how to play with a video game with assessment every 5 minutes. They will abandon it very quickly, and you can write a standardized curriculum for playing video games too. Right? That's, you can probably get them to do that. It's very quickly, and they will just lose interest. So those are what we call unproductive successes. And then we have, of course, productive failures, which means short-term. We look at a failure, like those exploration, you get frustrated. It's, like children, how come we just don't get it? It takes so long. But boom, once they have it, they get it. This is as with psychological stuff, we call the aha moment. There are two types of psychologists think about. One type of psychologists, the behaviorists think about. It's always trial and error, okay? You keep trying and you figure out. Another one is actually called more for intuitive thinking model. I don't know if you look at monkeys. There's a lot of experiments in the 1930s. Chimpanzees were placed, traditionally, if you put, let's say, 5 boxes here and hang up a banana up there, so for the chimpanzee to get to the banana, he must stack up all the boxes together to figure that out. And traditionally, people think the chimps would play with this thing, didn't work or not. Actually, if you did that, it would take a long time to get there. So then the new group of psychologists called Gestalt psychology from Germany, and they discovered chimps would indeed play with that. They would try to stack a little bit, and they would stop. Maybe for 10, 15 minutes, they suddenly, construct the whole picture. They go stack up, they can get it. So a lot of learning is like that. But today in our curriculum, we don't do things like, we think everything is linear addition. Do you guys notice that? You cannot miss this point. We got to make sure this point is ready, this point is ready. So you have this whole model in schooling is all about readiness. Do you guys notice that? Ready to go to Melbourne. Is a backpack ready. I found students to be really the saddest bunch in life. They're always getting ready for something, they never get to do it. Right? Before they come to school, you said, are you ready for kindergarten? Kindergarten is not a job, but we tell them, are you ready for kindergarten? Kindergarten is ready for first year for second year. They never get to do anything. By the time they get to do something, that something they prepared for has changed. It's very sad. Never be a student again. Don't do that, okay? So this is another called side effects. It's unproductive success and productive failures. So think about in education, when do you have those measures? So let me actually bring this to this idea of creativity. It's a good example. How does school kill creativity? Remember those, you've heard from Ken Robinson, everybody talks about, Ken and we use the same groups, a bunch of data. This data, you've seen this many times. So everybody is born creative. This is another issue. When we talk about creativity, we always now suddenly think we got to teach creativity. Nobody cared about creativity until the 1940s, 1960s. And this is, if you go to Google Books, you can find out how many times a term has been mentioned, okay? So this is the times the word creativity has been mentioned. You see, nobody mentioned this, millions of books. Nobody cared. And if you compare this to say, you say the creativity at the bottom, there's a lot of mentioning of children, a lot of mentioning of school, but nobody mentioned creativity. So creativity is a new thing, as if creativity never existed. And so that's why we have this idea in every school, when you have this tulip garden idea. You say, we used to plant tulip. Now we need some roses in there now. We just add, the creativity is added thing. That's why you guys today have this thing. Creativity is a new DNA. Creativity is in the DNA. Human beings are born creative. Actually, creativity is the only thing that differentiates human beings from other animals. Like fish does not have creativity. I hope not, but because fish is born with the knowledge it needs to survive. Human beings are not born with the knowledge. We're born with the capacity to acquire the knowledge. Because for him, God, I don't know, evolution, it gets into God or into evolution, or Darwin, which one? both. Just to be nice to you, okay. So somehow human beings, what we cannot pre-plan. I think God or evolution is smarter than most of your curriculum people. They said, we cannot plan where you might be born, for example. I don't know, you might be born in China, Australia, or I don't know, Saudi Arabia, so I cannot pre-plan a language in your head. I cannot plan Chinese. It would be much easier if they plan Chinese. I'm born to speak Chinese. So I can only plan for you the capacity to learn, to adjust, to adapt to your new environment. And that is called creativity. Creativity, psychologically speaking, simply is your ability to combine existing things to come up with new ideas. So that's how we learn. All learning, all real learning, comes from creativity, not from memorization. So let me give you an example. Let me teach you something. Anyone speak Chinese? Good. I can make up something. That's good. So if I want to say, okay, I said this, okay, I want to teach you something. I hold this to you, and I will say, okay, he, what do I mean? What do I mean? Clicker? Other guesses? Louder, please. You guys are secondary school principals. You can be louder. What do I mean? Look. Okay, any other guesses? Remember, you're creating choices. You're creating hypotheses. Any other guesses? Fifth one? This one. Excellent. Okay, any other choices? Let's see how creative. If I'm dealing with a group of 5-year-olds, they would have come 100 solutions, because you've lost it. Remember this one, by the age 44, no one is creative anymore. Okay, that's that. So no. You can come up with all kind of guesses, right? You can say clicker, the shape, rectangular, long, or anything like that. So if I point to say again, remember, he, what do I mean? Black. See how creative you are? Do you notice that thing? That's how learning is happening. Learning is always you combine something, you come up with something, you test it out. If it doesn't work, you try it again. That's how called constructing. That's all everyone is creative. So creativity is born with us. Then what schools do, because schools traditionally, we don't like creative people. I know you guys, yeah, we love it. Creativity is a general capability, but really you don't like kids like this. It's a creativity, not in my school. Try in another class, okay? Then come back, we'll handle this. Everybody has some kind of dictatorial little guy in our heart. We would love to tell other people what to do, okay? Creativity means they form their own ideas. Even though psychologically speaking, everybody is creating new solutions. But also, constantly being creative is not productive. Okay, so sometimes we actually don't want you to be too creative because, for example, every time you go to open the door, you say, oh, I'm going to be creative. I'm going to push it up, push it down, try left or right. That's not efficient. You actually need to stop being creative in some domains. That's called mastery. So that's why you go do something there. So what happens here is that schools wants to decline creativity, but you want to sharpen the creativity in certain domains. So creativity is not generic either. Like a creative mathematician is different from a creative musician. So how do we drop creativity in our schools? We overdo it. When they come to school, what do you tell them? You tell them to memorize the association between a problem and an answer. You always tell them that all your best students are the ones who never get to solve a problem, never get to identify a problem. They always say, okay, answer to a question. Remember, that's what you always do. You tell them, there's only one way to do math, and we do this thing. Which in our schools, none of this happens in real life, but we try to make them less creative, so they're more efficient. You take good test scores. The test is that this is the problem, this is the answer associated with. But in real life, we never do those things, right? In life, in a geography test, is okay, what's the capital of China? A student says Shanghai. He said, wrong, think again. But in real life, Do you get to do that? Listen, maybe your girlfriend says, honey, where do you want to go have dinner? I say, Chianti. Say, wrong, think again. We don't like that answer, right? How would you feel like about that? But that's how we do it. We drop because we don't want you to create an answer. Because a good employee needs to do the whole idea. So when you are doing any of this work, I don't have to go, I can expand into many other things. But generally speaking, the better you become a student, the less creative you become, in essence. But you don't have to be, you can blame the elementary schools. They lose 60% of them. Secondary school only destroy 20%, They did it, the bulk of them happened in primary grades. So you can blame them, right? But also this doesn't happen in South Australia schools. It happens in other countries. You never lose anybody, But so when you go through the whole process of thinking about the whole thing, I want to just bring this back for you to consider about side effects. I can go on now to go through the whole process. Just think about all this from a different angles. So what education does is that diversification, homogenization. Remember I said that? Think about cognitive or non-cognitive, short-term, long-term, and also think about measurable versus unmeasurable. Like when you evaluate a staff, for example, in a school, you measure how well they've improved some test scores. Why don't you ever count if you, a student, just saved a student by giving that one student hope? Like you talk to a student believed now she can be somebody, she can do something. That's probably a lot more important than you've raised the test score by 2 points. But where does that count? We don't count those things, right? And the final point I want to make is called the floor versus the ceiling. When I was talking about NAPLAN, all this thing, it really bothers me for a country like this to treat the floor expectation as the ceiling expectation. Numeracy and literacy should be the floor, not the ceiling. You never get inspired by how bottom you can go. You should always be inspired how high we can go. So then you're basically been all racing to the bottom to get literacy and numeracy. You can do a lot more in your education. So when you measure these floor outcomes, you're ignoring the ceiling outcomes. That's why in many you get criticized all the time. So because the test score, like NAPLAN, like TIMSS, like PISA, they're measuring the floor, the most basic things, okay? And you don't need to go that far. You can do a lot more. Let's think an example. Again, wine center. It's a good example to talk about wine. When you were younger, you were poor, and you drank $5 bottle of wines, right? This twist cap. Now you're a principal, you can come wine center, you drink $100 from, Clare Valley. Now if I only measure how fast you get drunk, no problem, no difference. Don't you think, right? Just how fast you get drunk with a $5, $100 bottle, and the $5 might work even better. That's right. So think about why do you want to reduce Australian education? It's a $10,000 education into a $10 education. You're competing with people, like I was not joking, in Tanzania, you're competing with people who don't have the resources. When you can't afford arts, music, technology, swimming, field trips, and those actually distract you from getting test scores in 2 subjects. Remember, distract? But those are giving you a lot more than you do. So why do you want to reduce your education into an education like this? This is a school in Tanzania. I was there. So in this school, I can guarantee you, if I try hard, I can get test scores. But in this school, I cannot get you to be an inventor of modern music. I cannot help you to design the next smartphone or smart communication devices here. But I can guarantee I can get you your numeracy and literacy in this place, if I spend enough time. So why do you treat the ceiling as the floor, no matter what you do? So just to end, another issue coming up right now, because people talk a lot about, let's say, visible learning. Visible learning is very famous in Australia, right? You guys keep importing stuff from New Zealand. fine, but that's okay. So visible learning, big data, all of these things coming along. Okay, so we're talking about how do we average, how do we personalize learning for everybody, those kind of things, big data. You know what they are? They're basic in this thing. Have you flown recently? Okay. So these chairs are based on big data. A lot of effect size, a lot of measures from a lot of people to average out to say, hope one is going to fit somebody. Is it comfortable for anyone? It doesn't fit anyone nicely. It fits the average. So none of your student is a statistical average. Your student is not a statistical probability. Every student actually is unique. So you need to shift thinking about, to support education, you probably need to make education like this. I call personalizable, not personalized. Personalized learning is an oxymoron. That means if it's already personalized, by whom, to whom, right? So I want to say, okay, a personalizable education supports the growth. Which that's my slogan for me coming back, Peter, because I'm writing a book about that. I'm coming back next year. So what I want to do is for you to think about education in the future, to think about more as a nature reserve, that every talent is valuable. Every talent can have different kind of outcomes. Everybody has a jagged profile of success. So it's the time of end of average. The end of average is not to prepare them for something, help them to acquire the ability to create their own future. Thank you.